and welcome to Dialogue. China has been the first among developing countries to tackle PM 2.5 pollution with efforts spanning 2 decades to pursue clean water and blue skies. And a new report published by international NGO Clean Air Asia documents these efforts. What does the report say? How has China moved towards cleaner air? And what more does China need to do to further reduce air pollution? To help us understand China's efforts to improve air quality, I'm today joined by Dr. Fu Lu, the China Director at Clean Air Asia, and He Kebin, academician at the Chinese Academy of Engineering and professor of the School of Environment at Tsinghua University, and Jeremy Schreifels, a visiting fellow at the Resources for the Future. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Hello, welcome to join the discussion. Dr. Fu, I will start with you. This year report about China's air quality and also the special issue called, China's 10-year path toward cleaner air, an Asian perspective. So tell us, what are the key findings for this year's report?
Thank you, Mr. Xu, for that question. Actually, this is the 8th year that Clean Air Asia developed the China Air Report series. Some findings are expected and some findings are pleasant surprises. Our key findings that for China from 2013 to 2021, China achieved significant air quality improvement alongside sustained economic growth. China's annual average PM 2.5 concentration dropped by about 56%, while the nation's GDP maintained an average growth rate of 6.6%. And last year, 70% of Chinese cities that monitor and release air quality met the PM 2.5 standard. And another key finding is China, as the largest coal consumer globally, has been very actively transforming the energy structure and delivers some really positive results. China's coal consumption ratio in total energy consumption declined, while most of other Asian developing countries, their coal consumption ratio has remained stable or continue to rise. And last year, the proportion of installed non-fossil power capacity exceeded that of coal power for the first time in China history. And what surprises our team is China's emission standards actually now rank among the most stringent in the world, with the country transforming from a follower to a leader in setting emission standards. And this has led to significant decline in air pollutant emissions. China's total SO2 and NOx emissions decreased by over 80% and 50% respectively. So we believe this is really a positive signal for developing countries that a win-win situation between economic development and air quality improvement can be achieved.
Well, that's indeed a happy surprise. When we talk about the efforts against the pollution, usually the case is like for developing countries like China. On one hand, you want to develop your economy. On the other hand, you want to have clean air, clean environment. But somehow, you can only have one side. Or if you have development, usually at expense of the environment. But so China is emerging out of that kind of dilemma.
We believe so, at least based on our analysis of the past decade. This is the data that shows China has achieved this win-win situation of economic development and air quality improvement.
Mm-hmm. Well, say we have also Professor He. How do you see China's efforts over the past, say, decades or even longer in their efforts against the pollution, in particular, in the pursuit to have a cleaner air, better air quality, which is a concern for the whole nation?
So I think there is several important points. The first one is along with the more than 2 decades, we have established a very important system. We call it, so I call it a science-based decision-making system. So in China, we have established the total system, including the monitoring, observation, emission inventory or source apportionments, and even the the modeling system. So based on those supporting scientific supporting activities, we can get in the high level decision making. The recent 10 years, for example, there is a two important action plan. The one is we call it a National Action Plan for Air Quality Improvement. That is from 2013 to 2017. So that's a 5 years plan. And then we have we call it a 3 years plan for Blue Sky Battle. That's from 2018 to 2020. So all of them, that is based on the very strong scientific basis. And based on that true action plan, we have just doing the very important the structure improvements, like Fulu just mentioned for the energy structure, for example, we have reduced, even we have a total energy increase a lot, but the proportion of the coal within the total energy has been decreased all the time. So from 67% to 56% within this 8 year. So, and also the similar adjustments for industrial structure and also the transportation structure. And we have doing a lot of work, like the emission, new emission standard. Today, China already has a China 6 vehicle emission standard, which is equal to Euro 6. And also we have a very large markets for the electric car, so electrification for the vehicle. And also we have ultra low emission technology for the power plants and so on. So I think that is a very important from the science and technology. And also we have doing the regional cooperation. That is also from the science funding, like the regional transport of the air pollution. So as we all know, we have doing the system for Beijing-Tianjin area, Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei area, we call it the Jinjinji region, and also the Pearl River Delta, Yangtze River Delta. So we have the regional cooperation. So of course, I think that is a very successful story, but I think the scientific based, the decision-making system is the most important thing.
Most important thing. Jeremy, you are in Washington, so if you approach this issue from an international perspective, of course, political will, popular demand for better quality, and of course, science-based decision-making process. And of course, if you look at this year or the year, past couple of years, because of the COVID, slowdown of the economy also probably contributes to the air quality. So what do you identify as a major probably factors leading to the improvement of air quality here in China?
Well, I think there are a number there. Professor He mentioned some of them. Really the key, I agree with Professor He that having that science-based approach has been the key, because China deploys an advanced network of air quality monitors around the country to measure the concentration of pollution in the atmosphere. Ideally, these sites are located where people live, work, and where they congregate, to provide a representative measurement of air quality in those locations. And that has really formed the foundation to assess the levels of air pollution, the transfer or the how pollution travels from one region to the next. Beyond that, China has built on establishing some of the most stringent standards for industry to reduce pollution. And then I think another key part of the effort in China has been the education of the public. It's been interesting to see over the decades, if you get in a taxi in the US or in Europe, it's very unlikely your taxi driver is going to talk to you about levels of PM 2.5. But if you get in a taxi in Beijing, it's a regular topic, or it was a regular topic of conversation. And improvements in air quality are now a regular topic in conversation. So that having that scientific basis for understanding the scale of the problem, putting in place policies to ensure that the problem is addressed, that air pollution is declining. Another key part of it is really that the economy in China has transformed as they've moved to cleaner energy technologies and implemented those stringent emission standards.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jeremy, how do you compare developing countries in terms of their air pollution or the major air pollutants to that probably in developed world in the US or in European countries?
Sure. In the US and European countries, PM 2.5 and ozone are the primary air quality problems. Really, PM 2.5, it's important to note that it's not a specific pollutant. Rather, it's a category of particulates. So it's small particles, or we call them fine particles, that can penetrate deep into the lungs and even enter the bloodstream. So this can, this includes chemicals like heavy metals and other toxic chemicals. The long-term exposure can have serious health consequences like heart disease, lung cancer, strokes, other serious consequences. Ozone, similarly, it's in Europe and the US, it's generally a summertime problem, but ozone can irritate the respiratory system, lead to respiratory illness, and increase the frequency of asthma attacks. Both countries in Europe and the US are adopting a number of programs to try and address air quality and to try and bring those levels down. But as we can see, Professor He mentioned the World Health Organization, and they periodically assess the best global science on the health effects of air pollution, and they publish air quality guidelines and encourage countries to consider those guidelines for their domestic standards. In 2021, WHO updated their guidelines for PM 2.5 and ozone. For PM 2.5, they suggested a standard. So the guideline is averaged over a 24-hour period, PM 2.5 should be no higher than 15. Over a year, should be no higher than 5 micrograms per cubic meter. For ozone, the 8-hour guideline is no more than 100 micrograms per cubic meter. These are really ambitious guidelines that most countries around the world would have difficulty meeting today. Just as a comparison, in the US, the 24-hour air quality standard for PM 2.5 is 35 micrograms per cubic meter relative to WHO's guideline of 15. So these are not easy targets to hit.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned about the WHO standards. Obviously, it's quite stringent to say the least. What does it mean to developing countries, for example, Asian countries, including China here in this region?
Well, looking specifically at China, I think the report that Clean Air Asia recently released that Dr. Fu mentioned, it shows that there's been tremendous progress over the last decade. But there's still, so the standard, the PM 2.5 standard for 24 hours in China is currently 75 micrograms per cubic meter relative to the 15 that the WHO suggests. So tremendous progress has been made, but there's still work to be done to continue to improve air quality. And one of the things that China has demonstrated, which really all of the world can learn from, but it's a particularly useful lesson for those, those developing countries that have an energy intensity or an energy intense economy, is that it is possible to break that linkage between economic development and emissions. So you can have good air quality with strong economic growth. And I think that's one of the key lessons. But to your question, I believe most of the energy intensive countries really around the globe, but in particular developing countries, will have a big challenge to meet those air quality guidelines.
Well, Professor He, as Jeremy mentioned about China's air quality PM 2.5, in this standard, it's still a long way probably to reach the WHO standards 15 here in China. It's 75. There's a lot to be done probably to reduce that kind of pollutants or pollution. What is China doing? The central government or the government's regional level, provincial level, doing to reduce the level of PM 2.5?
Yeah, I think so, we have the systematic working at the national level. I just mentioned the True Action Plan at the national level, and also we have the system works. Once the national level has set up the goal, and they were divided into the different province and different city. So they have the 3 levels action plan actually. National level, provincial level, and municipal level. So according to that, then every year they have the divided for the 5 years goal and divided into each year. So each year, for example, the one mayor should report to the Congress, or they say, what have you doing last year? And so have you realized your goal? I think that is really works for that. So technically you can see they will rely on the scientific activities and to answer the question for the mayor, say, what is the major sources for my city? And then what should we do one by one? And then they will really follow that. And it gets the results, the improvements year by year. So I think that system is really working. Now I think that we have a difficult time as for example 2015, because when you're just doing at the very beginning, and you cannot see very quick response for the improvements. So at that time, the medians, publicus, and decision makers will criticize the scientific team. So, but now everybody say we believe you, and we really get the better air quality and the successful results. So I think this works is scaling smoothly in recent years.
Well, Dr. Fu, inside this special issue by organization, you mentioned about the Asian perspective when we talk about the 10 years for China in the path toward better air quality. Why the Asian perspective, or where China is compared with other Asian countries in this region?
I like this question. First of all, Clean Air Asia, we are based in Asia, and our mission is to improve air quality and build healthy and livable cities in Asia. That's our mission. And why compare with Asian countries? China is the largest economy in Asia, and Asia as a vital driver of economic growth globally. Many Asian developing countries are in the process of rapid urbanization, industrialization, motorization, and they are facing challenges in air pollution control and greenhouse gases emissions reduction. So China has moved quickly and achieved positive results. So we want to know where the other Asians right now stand, and want to also explore if China can contribute to the region's path towards clean air and the decarbonization. That's why we developed this report.
Well, Jeremy, obviously China is, there's the second largest economy, so it consumes a lot of energy, even as the economy structure is evolving, for example, toward more service-based instead of heavy investment and export-driven economic growth. And also China consumes a lot of coal, and actually coal consumption is continuing to increase probably up to 2025. So how does China strike a balance? On one hand, you want to achieve a better quality, improve air quality. On the other hand, you want to continue the economic growth.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that is a challenge for energy planners around the globe. I think there are a couple parts to that answer. One is the cleaner use of energy. And as Professor Ho mentioned earlier, some of the standards that have been adopted are among the most stringent in the world, especially for power plants. Another answer is to accelerate that shift away from coal toward other energy, cleaner energy sources, both from an air quality perspective, but also a climate perspective. Renewable energy is, obviously one area there, and China has been a leader in both deploying renewable energy as well as developing and manufacturing those technologies. Some of the technologies have already been widely deployed and have proven their effectiveness, like wind, solar, hydroelectric. But we're also moving into a stage where these technologies are continuing to advance and we're getting better energy storage. So I think as some of those costs continue to decline, it will make deploying them more cost effective. And in fact, in many areas, including the US, renewable energy is now cheaper than many of the conventional energy sources like coal. And I think there's one other technology or practice that doesn't get enough attention when talking about energy, and that's really energy management, because across the world, a tremendous amount of energy is wasted every day, and improving how we use electricity, so making the equipment and practices more efficient so that we can better manage electricity demand and balance that with supply, can reduce the need for that coal consumption.
Well, Jerry, you mentioned about energy management. Say it is probably somehow being overlooked, probably worldwide in terms of energy consumption. Tell us more about that. Is it about daily consumption for the consumers, or is it about the government action or the lack of action to improve the awareness or produce the necessary equipment and gadgets, probably to save energy or to improve the efficiency of energy use?
That's a great question, and the technology continues to improve every year, but the technology is there. What needs to be there is the incentives to use it, but also the education of consumers. And by consumers, I'm also thinking industry as well as households, to understand, well, perhaps first of all, the consequences of their energy consumption, but then the opportunities that they have to use energy more efficiently and incentives to deploy those technologies that are readily available.
Well, Professor He, China is in a leading position in terms of renewables, the manufacturing and installation of these equipments, for example, but still the percentage of the consumption of the renewables in China's energy mix is relatively small. What are the challenges? In what way China may, achieve a breakthrough, probably to rely more on renewables instead of fossil fuel?
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, the direction is quite clear. We will increase the proportion of, say, renewable energy, but the key issue right now is China is a huge system for the electric the system, the grid system. We should say it's the largest grid system in the world. Even we can say that. So when you're trying to reduce the traditional system like the coal-fired or fossil fuel electricity system, and also increase the new renewable energy, the security of the power system is the most important one. So that is a first one. We call it a new grid system. That is our goal to establish, but they still has some technology problem to holding the stabilization. We will solve that in the near future, but we still need time for that. Even for not only for China but also for the whole world. The International Energy Agency, IEA, in Paris has given the reports. They have reviewed all of the current technology and also the future technology for the near zero carbon emission future, the world future. So the conclusion is currently only half of the technology already commercialized, and still have another half we need the time to the new technology developments. So I think not only China, but even in the world, if you want, somebody just take the example, say some of the European country, they have a higher proportion like Denmark and also even Germany. So, but if you look at the scale, the total scale of the grades, it cannot compare with even in China, even several provinces of China. So they still have some the technology problem, but I believe we will solve it in the future, in the near future.
Yeah, there's a hope in the future. Dr. Fu, overall, based on the report for China's past 10 year to achieve a better quality and also aging situation, China's 2022, 2021, what are the suggestions, by your organization, for China to continue to reduce its air pollution and, of course, for better air quality and better living environment?
I think actually, China government has already had the answers, because when we look back at the past 10 years, we've seen the path. At the beginning, China adopted the end-of-pipe control approach, meaning tightening emission standards now rank among the most stringent in the world. And then to further improve air quality, China opted for the transformation of energy, industrial, and transport sectors. This is the trend of other developed countries in Asia, Europe, and America. So this is the answer: energy transition, the transformation of energy, industrial, and transport sectors.
Well, transformation. Related to that, Jeremy, China as well as other many countries, of course, the developed world, the developing countries, they have made this goals. For example, in China, 2030, the peaking of carbon emission, and also the 2060, the neutrality of carbon emission over there. How do that kind of efforts help probably reduce air pollution?
Oh yes, clearly, the transformation of industrial sector, energy sector, transportation sector, those as we become to a more or move toward a more carbon neutral path, that's also going to have tremendous advantages for air quality. So I completely agree with Dr. Fu that that is the essential path that globally we need to look at.
Well, with that, we come to the end of today's discussion. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Qingduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.